The year is 897 AD, and Rome is in the midst of one of the most bizarre events in its history. A council of church leaders has convened in the city to settle some theological disputes, but they're not debating doctrine or discussing the nature of God. Instead, they're arguing over the corpse of Pope Formosus, who died in office 3 years prior. You heard that right? The Roman Catholic Church was having a council to discuss the dead body of one of their own. And it would only get weirder as time went on. Formosus had been a highly controversial pope, even by the standards of the time. A former monk, he'd been elected in 891 after a series of power struggles that saw 2 other candidates locked up in separate towers. Formosus was a relatively young man for the papacy, being only in his mid-40s when he took the throne. He immediately set about reforming the church, targeting simony, which is the selling of church positions, and trying to end the practice of allowing the wealthy to purchase indulgences. This practice, which had been common since the days of the apostles, held that those who repented of their sins and atoned for them with good works could be forgiven before they died. However, Formosus believed that this practice had become corrupt and that many were purchasing indulgences without making any real effort to improve their behavior. Not surprisingly, his reforms made him very unpopular with many of the clergy who were living comfortably through simony and selling indulgences. When Formosus died in 896, there were rumors that he'd been poisoned, though it's impossible to say if there was any truth to this. Either way, these rumors would have a major impact on the future of the papacy as soon as a replacement needed to be chosen. Enter Stephen, the man who would become infamous for calling the world's first known zombie trial. Stephen was a former cardinal who was appointed Bishop of Anagni, Italy, by none other than Formosus himself. So you can imagine that he might have had a few enemies within the church hierarchy. At the time, the election of a new pope required the approval of the Roman nobility, and Stephen's opponents accused him of underhanded dealings with them to secure his position. They even claimed that he'd bribed a countess named Theodora to help him take the throne. Still, Stephen won out and became Pope Stephen VI. But shortly after he took office, he began to face serious opposition. The counts accused him of breaking his agreement and not paying them back the money he supposedly owed them. And now, Stephen's opponents in the church began accusing him of murdering Formosus so he could become pope. While Stephen managed to fight off the counts, he wasn't able to do anything about the accusations from within the church. Eventually, the pressure became too great, and Stephen was forced to summon a synod, a meeting of church officials, to defend himself. But Stephen wanted to make sure he'd have enough allies there to back him up. So he sent letters inviting not only church officials from around central Italy, but also theologians from France and England. Unfortunately for Stephen, he didn't realize how much Formosus' death had affected the church. Many of the people he invited were not willing to cross the channel to attend a trial about a dead pope, no matter how much money he offered them. As a result, only 5 men showed up, all of them from central Italy. And to make matters worse, 2 of them were from the monastery where Formosus had died, and the other 3 had been appointed by Formosus himself. Now, while Stephen had the majority, he still didn't have a very strong case. The men from the monastery claimed that Formosus' death had been a natural one, and that there was no need for an investigation. Meanwhile, Formosus' appointees said that Stephen's accusations were nothing more than slander, and that the real reason Stephen had called the synod was to cover up his own crimes. Now, faced with absolutely no evidence against Formosus, Stephen tried to change the subject and focus on what he saw as real problems within the church. He discussed the sale of indulgences and simony, but his fellow church leaders refused to budge. They accused Stephen of abusing his authority and trying to seize power for himself. At this point, Stephen knew he was losing the support of the church leaders, so he did something completely unexpected. He pulled Formosus' corpse out of its tomb and placed it on a throne beside him. And then he proceeded to interrogate the corpse. That's right. Stephen VI interrogated the corpse of his predecessor as if he were still alive. According to the accounts of those who witnessed the event, Stephen began by slapping the corpse across the face, saying, "Tell me, was the money paid to you or was it paid to another?" Of course, Formosus didn't answer, and after a few minutes, Stephen grew tired of this line of questioning and moved on to his next one. He then began reading documents aloud and asked Formosus if he approved of what he was reading. If he agreed with the writings, Stephen said yes, and if he disagreed, he said no. Again, the corpse gave no indication of whether or not it approved. This continued for a while until Stephen got angry and began shouting at the corpse, at which point the men present began to walk out. Those who left early claimed that they did so because they didn't want to witness what happened next, but others said they left because they couldn't believe their colleagues were taking this seriously. Either way, by the end of the day, only 4 men remained in the room with the corpse. The 2 monks from the monastery had already left, as well as one of the men appointed by Formosus. That meant that the only ones remaining were Stephen and 2 men who had been appointed by Stephen himself. With them were the corpse of Formosus and several piles of bones that may have belonged to popes who died centuries earlier. And now Stephen really lost his cool. He began throwing the bones into the air and asking questions as if they were the spirits of the long-dead popes. Then he turned to the corpse of Formosus and shouted, "You are the devil, and you shall be cast into the abyss." After that, he ordered the corpse stripped of its fine linens and thrown into the Tiber River. Finally, he tore up Formosus's will and ordered his belongings to be divided among the 4 men in the room. Then, he sent the 4 men home, telling them to keep secret what they had seen that day. But they wouldn't be able to keep it a secret for long. News of the Cadaver Synod spread quickly throughout Europe, and people were both shocked and disgusted by what Stephen had done. He'd shown no respect to the dead and had treated the corpse of a pope as if it were garbage. The other popes who had watched in horror during the synod didn't dare speak out against Stephen, so the disgraced Stephen remained in power until his own death in 898. As for Formosus, his corpse was fished out of the river a short time later and given a proper burial. However, his troubles were far from over. His successor, Stephen, continued to denigrate him after death, and it wasn't until 925 that his remains were finally allowed to rest in peace. All told, Formosus's corpse was exhumed 4 times in the following decades. First by Stephen, then by the next pope Sergius III when he took the throne in 904, then in 913 when Formosus's original tomb was being renovated, and finally in 925 when his remains were moved to a church near the Vatican. After all that, it's safe to say that Formosus was the most mistreated pope in history, at least until Benedict IX was elected in 1325 and then quickly imprisoned by his rival, Cardinal Jacques Duez. Duez had Benedict transferred to a monastery where he spent the next 10 years writing treatises on how bad a pope he was. We've come a long way since then, haven't we? Speaking of coming a long way, we've actually come a long way ourselves. We've traveled to every corner of the globe to bring you the best stories of history's most mysterious and terrifying events. Our team of writers and researchers spend countless hours combing through old documents and records to find the most fascinating tales and then craft them into cinematic scripts complete with suspenseful music and sound effects. We then hire voice actors to bring those characters to life and edit the entire thing together to make an experience that will leave you breathless. It takes a lot of work to produce the quality content that our viewers expect, but it's work we're proud of. It's work we love doing because we want to share these incredible stories with as many people as possible. But unfortunately, it's also work that doesn't always turn a profit. If you're like most of our viewers, then you probably watch all of our videos ad-free on a streaming platform. However, if you want to watch our videos as they were intended, then you should sign up for a streaming service. There, you'll find all of our videos with no ads or sponsorships, and in some cases, extended footage that you won't find anywhere else. Plus, you'll get access to exclusive content that's only available on our streaming service. And with our new membership tiers, you can choose the level of access that works best for you. So go ahead and check it out. For less than the price of a cup of coffee per month, you'll get access to hundreds of hours of incredible historical documentaries. And by signing up, you'll be helping us continue producing the content that you love.